Hey everybody, Charlie Stevens here. Thank you so much for tuning in to another guitar lesson today. So that was a little bit of Wild Thing, one of the first songs I learned on guitar, which I think I'll wait a little bit longer to show you because we're kind of showing you symbols in the same time. Since this isn't face-to-face, we're doing a more comprehensive approach that involves reading music and kind of really getting into stuff slowly. So we can do that song if you guys are interested. That was one of the first things I ever learned, super easy to kind of hear back and copy, but if we were going to notate it and explain it that way in the terms we've been using, we would have to wait a little longer and learn a little bit of some different symbolism. But anyhow, this part here is just an A chord where they let go. And I noticed that was really cool. I could just play the A chord, I could play the open strings. Okay, and that was really cool. And that led me to this concept that I'd like to talk about today, the strum for nothing. Okay, so that was kind of the first time I encountered it, and then I started noticing it in my strumming patterns, or maybe I even saw a YouTube video about it or something like that. I can't remember exactly when I started using this because it's been a part of my playing for a long time. So basically what the strum for nothing is strumming all of our open strings in certain places. So when we're learning our chords and our eighth note rhythms, like we've been doing on this channel very recently, when we have chords changing and we have something like an upstroke, for instance, on the and of beat 4, right before the chord changes to a different chord, right? So that's a little tricky. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. And 1. I have to make sure that chord change is really clean, and that can be really difficult. So you should work on that where you can do it. Sometimes you'll have to do it, and we don't want to use this trick, the strum for nothing. But you'd be surprised at how well this works. So the strum for nothing is taking that last thing that happens, that last upstroke, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and instead of worrying about that and then not having that much time to get my fingers over here for C, I'm just going to let go of the chord. Yeah, and play all my open strings. So it seems like you shouldn't be able to do that, right? It seems like that's wrong. And in certain ways of thinking it sort of is. That's not really the chord that we're going for here. It's just an open string chord, right? So in some ways of thinking that is sort of wrong, but it actually sounds really cool. Most of the time it adds a little bit of like rhythmic emphasis to something, and it sounds right, it sounds cool, and it makes it easier for you. Okay, so as you're getting better and better at chords, you will want to get quick enough where you don't need to utilize this trick eventually, for sure. There will be certain musical contexts where you won't want to utilize it. But for a lot of things, it sounds really cool, and in the beginning, it can be a great way to get you started. So let me explain this. We're going to go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. See, I just let go. Now I'm really letting my fingers prepare for C. Okay, so a weird little trick or hack kind of thing that we can do for the guitar where it doesn't seem like it should work, but it usually sounds really good, adds this little extra rhythmic flair to it, and can be really fun. Okay, great. So in example number 1, we're going to play this rhythm, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and. Okay, so we have quarter note, eighth note. Okay, so on the and of beat 4, that's where we can do this, because then we're going to go to a C chord, and we'll do the same rhythm. And then after that, we'll go to a D chord, and we can do that here. And just let go on the and of 4. And then we do the D chord, we do the same rhythm. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you let go. You don't have to do it when it turns around, because you're not going anywhere. If you want just to hear did it even when it turned around, because now I had this repeating rhythmic idea and I wanted to keep that even for the last one. Okay, why don't we try that together? Example number 1. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and... Sounds a little silly to end there without hearing the resolution. This trick is just ending right on that. Might be a little bit abrupt, but typically we wouldn't do that anyway. We'd go. Do a long strum at the very end of the song or something, so you wouldn't really get that that weirdness. But you can experiment with that. Maybe you like that. Okay, you can think of lots of different places to do this, but. To me, this really sets our priority list. So do we want to be playing the right chord and squeezing down? Sure. But do we want to be playing the right rhythm? Like, so if I'm doing this, for instance, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2. See how I needed a minute to get to that other chord? That's not cool in music. It's just not. We really need to have this like really consistent pulse, and that's really what non-musicians and casual listeners will really pick up on. Timing is everything in music. So I would rather you had good time. I let go of the chord way early that time, but I got to it on time. I would prefer that than to hear this chord and then to hear nothing as you think about getting to that chord, right? So again, I have lessons on this channel where we talk about just the chord shapes, and there's practice habits, how to practice chords, where we talk about ways to get these grips to be where you can just go in between them. This is another way. Practicing even keeping the rhythm going and giving yourself that extra time if you need it at first to let go of the guitar. Okay? So I think this is a really cool technique. Alright, in example number 2, we're going to do some E minor stuff here. So this is what it sounds like. And then that would repeat. So I'm going E minor, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and. So there's a quarter note on beat 1, eighth notes throughout the rest of the measure. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and I'm doing the strum for nothing. 1. I think this sounds cool between these particular chords. Gives me somewhere else to go. It's like a third chord in there. It's kind of a cool thing. Anyhow, also the open strings are very similar to a regular E minor anyway, so you know, it's not very different in this case. Okay, so we have one measure of E, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and one measure D, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and another measure of E, 3, and 4, and the last measure we split, 1, 2, and 3, 4. So this time we're doing the strum for nothing on the and of 2 instead of the and of 4, because this is where the chord changes. So the and of 4 is how I have it set up in most of these examples, because I think that's the most obvious place and the most common place we can start seeing it, but really it's not about that, it's about where the chord changes. Here the chord changes on beat 3, so the and of 2 is the spot right before that where we're going to do our strum for nothing. Alright, let's try this one together. Example number 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. Cool, I like that one. Good chords. These two chords go well nice together. Having, you know, you can mess with different strumming patterns with this too if you like this combination as well. Watch the last video we had here on this channel was about how to mix and match quarter notes and eighth notes and how to come up with all these variations of rhythm. So feel free to take this chord progression and experiment with some different rhythmic patterns if you'd like. Okay, in example number 3, we're going to use the chords A minor, C, G, I'm using G5, you can use any of your Gs, and E major. So ending in an E major, that leads us back to A minor as a repeat, very nice sounding chord progression. So we're going to go 1, 2, and 3, 4, and on the and of 4, we're going to do the strum for nothing, because on the next measure we're going to change chords. Okay? Pretty straightforward, I think, but let's go nice and slow. Example number 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I'm being pretty obvious with my strum for nothings in there because I want you to be able to hear them to get the hang of this, but really I would kind of downplay those. I'd strum them a little bit lighter and less loudly than some of the other notes, you know, so they don't stand out. They're you know, since it's sort of a wrong note, we're kind of not trying to make it stand out. It's okay for it to be in there, but you want to, you know, strum it kind of an appropriate volume. Another thing is tempo will really help blend it in. At slower tempos, it's more obvious. I'm going to play this one again for you, a little bit faster. Keep up if you like, but it's mostly just so you can hear the sound of it. But if you can keep up, please join me again on example number 3. 1, 2, and 3, 4, and. Okay, so hopefully you can hear that a little bit faster. I tried to downplay those a little bit more. I wanted you to still be able to hear them though, so, you know, not too much. But yeah, it starts to sound like real music, I think, right? So this is such a cool trick because it gets us thinking creatively. We take something that should be wrong. Well, if it's the chord for this whole measure, and if you look at the tab, I didn't write a different name for this open chord, even though you could technically call the open strings of a guitar an E minor 11 if you wanted to, but who wants to, right? But anyway, for the whole measure, it's just one chord. We're just letting go a little bit early for this practical reason of getting to the chord sooner, and that's also giving us a little bit more of a rhythmic variation in a cool way. So it's a little bit of a way to think outside a box, a little bit of a less traditional approach than you might think, well, if this chord is a whole measure, I better not let go early. And sometimes that is true. So, you know, take this with a grain of salt, but hopefully this will help you get some more comfort under your fingers when playing rhythm, give you more confidence on changing chords at the right time, and eventually you can kind of wean yourself off of this trick if you need to. All right, so I have one more example for you. This one we're going to do G, E minor, C, and D. Very famous chord progression, sometimes nicknamed the doo-wop chord progression or the 1950s chord progression. So a good one to be aware of. And we're going to do this rhythm where we have eighth notes on beat 1, and then quarter notes on 2 and 3, and then eighth notes on beat 4. Okay, so 1 and 2, 3, 4, and 1 and 2, 3, 4, and. Okay, kind of a nice rhythm. And we're going to do the strum for nothing on the and of 4. Ready? Let's go ahead and try this one together, please. Example number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sounds nicer if we ended on the G, but technically the way these examples are written, we wouldn't do that. But in reality, we would, right? You'd end on the main chord again. That goes back into what we were talking about, what a key is and things like that. It's usually the tonic chord we would play there, which if we're in the key of G would be a G chord. And this example was in the key of G. Okay, so that's the strum for nothing. So all of these examples that we did in our last video too, where we were trying out all these different combinations of rhythms, any of these that happen before we change chords, for the instance the and of beat 4, any of those are a good place to do the strum for nothing. You'll have to try it out. If you like it, great. If you don't like it, don't use it. It might not work between from one chord to a different chord for whatever reason. That might not sound good between those chords. It might not work because of the way the song is. It might, the song might not lend itself to this particular trick, okay? But I think a lot of them will. I think you'll find that this is pretty versatile and you can use it in a lot of places. But, if it doesn't sound right, don't use it. It probably isn't right for whatever song you're trying it in. But if you're just going through our last video and you're making up your own rhythms, you decide. It's going to sound right if you want it to be in there. You can build your idea around it to where it sounds good, right? So yeah, you can be creative with this. You want to tap your foot when you play. You really want to get to those next chords on time. Timing is so important. You really want to prioritize that. Get there on the right time. Even if you let go, even if you let go a little bit to get there, that had a nice even rhythm. Some of my notes were not great, but that's okay. Rhythm is more important. And then as you get better and better at your rhythm, you can be more selective about your notes. Perhaps you won't need this trick. I don't need it, but I still use it sometimes because I like the way it sounds. Okay, so it's also for that. Kind of like training wheels, but also it is its own technique that you should be aware of no matter what level of a player you are. Alright, well thank you so much for watching this lesson. Please subscribe to the channel and I look forward to seeing you for another guitar lesson really soon. Thanks again.